We just witnessed the most terrifying thing about this Minnesota Timberwolves team, and yet they actually won the game by 11 points. We're going to break down the win and, more importantly, discuss where the defense, and I do mean this, where their defense totally and utterly vanished during the second half of the game tonight. We'll get into why did that actually happen in great detail. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in to the Timberwolves Digest. As always, North America, I am Dave Dabbah. Now, this show is totally interactive. Timberwolves fans, I want to hear from you. Please go ahead and drop in your comments throughout today's pod. I want to know if you watched what I saw, if you saw what I saw, what happened to be a vanishing act by the Timberwolves defense in the second half of a game against a team that has only won one game so far this season. So we'll talk about the defense in just a little bit, and we'll get into great detail. Hey, new to the channel, please go ahead and subscribe as well. But we begin, actually, with the score of tonight's game. And the score, of course, was 120 to 109. And we'll get into which players actually played well, who played a little bit sluggish tonight. We'll talk about all of that. I do want to point this out super quick. At one point in the first half of a game against the Washington Wizards tonight, the T-Wolves had a 27-point lead and watched it totally and utterly vanish all the way to the point where we got down to the last 5 minutes of the game, and Chris Finch probably had to stop thinking about what he was actually going to DoorDash tonight and actually put his coaching hat back on. He was actually forced to coach the last 5 minutes of the game. Of course, the T-Wolves ended up winning by 11, but Washington certainly scared them tonight. They came to within 5 points of the Timberwolves after the Timberwolves had that 27-point lead. Now, in terms of who actually performed extraordinarily well for our T-Wolves tonight, it certainly was Naz Reid, who's clearly playing like a six-man of the year contender at this point. Naz had 28 points and was a large reason why the Timberwolves had a 27-point lead in the first half to begin with. He had 23 points in the first half, and if you will, Naz was totally on fire. Now, Julius Randle, of course, posted north of 30 points tonight in the game, and I wanted to show you this post specifically because the gentleman or person that made this comment actually comments about Julius Randle actually being the Minnesota Timberwolves' most consistent player to this point so far this season. And in large part, I totally agree with this particular person. Now, you would think it would be Ant-Man, and like last year, you'd see Ant-Man have some games which were a little bit sluggish, and tonight happened to be one of those games which was a little bit sluggish. It's almost as if he was playing, but taking the night off. And one of the primary reasons that the Washington Wizards were actually able to actually get back into this thing to begin with in the second half is they actually started double teaming Ant-Man pretty consistently throughout the second half of the game, which basically shut him down for a large part of the game. I mean, still, Ant-Man ended up with a significant amount of points in the game anyways, because he is, of course, Ant-Man, and that's what the Ant-Man does. He had 18 points in the game. Here's the total breakdown for you of the key players for the T-Wolves tonight. Julius Randle, 32 and 10 and 6. Naz Reid, as we mentioned, 28-5. He did have one really nice block shot and 2 steals in the game. Dante DiVincenzo actually was forced into heroics sort of down the stretch, made a key 3, as did old man Mike Connelly. who's totally skied down the backside of Career Mountain at this point. But Mike Connelly hit a clutch three at the end of the game, which actually boosted the Timberwolves lead back into double digits. At that point, I think it was safe to say that the Timberwolves were going to win the game when Mike Conley hit that three. Still, it was a scare tonight for the Timberwolves, and this is, quite frankly, one of the most terrifying things about this particular Minnesota Timberwolves team. Now, we're going to get into really a couple things tonight about the defense, and I thought I would actually start with Jaden. Now, Jaden, as you all know, did not play tonight. Now, he has a wrist injury. You know, if this was a playoff game, I'm sure he would have played. But he didn't play tonight, and you could see from a defensive perspective how they actually missed Jaden tonight in the game. Certainly, we know that Jaden gets a lot of rebounds per game. We also know that Jaden is having his best offensive season of his career to this point. Did you know, though, that Jaden McDaniels, that's right, is leading the NBA in three-point percentage so far this season? 52.1% is where he's at this point. So not only does he provide excellent defense, as we all know, and Chris Finch certainly knows that as well, and Chris Finch actually relies on Jaden McDaniels often when things actually start to go off the kilter, so to speak, which does happen with this Timberwolves team sometimes in the third quarter, sometimes in the fourth quarter. He'll bring Jaden in early and have him reset the defensive tone. That was totally and utterly missing tonight, especially in the second half of the game. I will give the Wizards this. They did play extraordinarily hard. This was not a cakewalk victory like the last Timberwolves victory. Love to know your thoughts and opinions on the Timberwolves tonight. Where do you think this all stacks up for this particular team? Getting Jaden back from a defense perspective will certainly help the team out. But watching the team totally break down the way they did in the second half, forcing Chris Finch to actually have to jump back in and actually coach the last 5 minutes of the game was a little bit terrifying if you're a Timberwolves fan, because we've all seen this before, these huge leads in the NBA, and a lot of times the newspapers, in this case, the digital newspapers, will have the big headlines, team squanders blank in loss to blank. And that's exactly where this Timberwolves team was heading until Dante DiVincenzo hit a clutch three. And of course, so did old man Mike Connelly. I think it would have been a different story entirely. In fact, I think this would have been a cakewalk victory had Jaden actually played tonight. I'd love to get your thoughts and opinions on the Timberwolves. Go ahead and drop them in. Thanks so much for subscribing and tuning in. If you like this video, please go ahead and like this video. For the Timberwolves Digest, I'm Dave Dabbah, wishing you a tremendous rest of your sports viewing day.